It is a little before 6 in the morning. The room is still dark. You are lying on your back, somewhere between sleep and waking, and your jaw has fallen slightly open. Air is moving in and out through your mouth in slow, dry pulls. It feels like nothing. It feels like the most ordinary thing a body does. Breathe in, breathe out, 20,000 times a day, without a single conscious instruction. Remotion, counter, from .0 to 10,000, label, breaths per day. Accent color, FFB 100. Here is the part that does not feel like anything and yet decides a great deal. The same volume of air can enter the body through two different doors. Through the mouth, it travels a short, simple tube straight to the throat. Through the nose, it travels through two narrow chambers lined with tissue that is doing chemistry the moment air passes over it. Same air, same lungs, same heart waiting downstream. But the blood that comes out the other side is not the same. There is a gas your nose produces continuously day and night, whether you ask it to or not. It is made in the hollow spaces in the bones of your face, and when you inhale through the nose, that gas is carried down into the lungs with the air. When you breathe through the mouth, almost none of it arrives. The gas has a name, oxide of nitrogen, and a job. It tells the smooth muscle in the walls of your blood vessels to relax and widen. So the question is small and exact. Two doors, same air, but only one of them delivers a molecule that opens the vessels and helps oxygen cross into the blood. The difference is not how much you breathe. It is which path the breath takes. What follows is the physics of that path. Hook to next block. To see why one door matters and the other does not, the molecule itself has to be introduced. And it has a Nobel Prize attached to it. For most of the 20th century, the inner lining of a blood vessel was treated as plumbing. A pipe. Its job was to be smooth and stay out of the way, while the muscle around it squeezed and the heart pushed. The lining itself, a single layer of cells called the endothelium, was assumed to be passive. That assumption was wrong, and the correction was large enough to win a Nobel Prize. In 1998, the prize in physiology or medicine went to three researchers: Robert Furch-Gott, Louis Ignarot, and Ferid Murad, for showing that the endothelium is not passive at all. It is a chemical controller. It manufactures a small gas molecule and releases it into the wall of the vessel, and that molecule carries a single instruction to the surrounding muscle: relax. When the muscle relaxes, the vessel widens. When the vessel widens, more blood flows through it at lower pressure. The molecule is nitric oxide, written as one atom of nitrogen bound to one atom of oxygen. Remotion, lower third. Name, Furch-Gott. Ignar, O. Murad, subtitle, Nobel Prize, Physiology or Medicine, 1998, nitric oxide as a signal. Furch-Gott had found the first clue years earlier. He noticed that a blood vessel would only relax to certain chemical signals if its inner lining was intact. Strip away the endothelium, and the same signal did nothing. So the lining was producing something, a short-lived factor, that did the actual relaxing. He called it endothelium-derived relaxing factor. It took further work, including Ignarot's, to identify that factor as nitric oxide itself, a gas doing chemistry inside the living wall of an artery. That a gas could be a messenger inside the body was the surprising part. Until then, signals were thought to be larger molecules, hormones and proteins, not a two-atom gas with a lifetime measured in seconds. The mechanism is worth holding precisely because the rest of this depends on it. Inside the endothelial cells sits an enzyme, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS for short. It takes an amino acid and oxygen and builds nitric oxide. The gas then drifts the short distance from the lining into the smooth muscle layer of the vessel wall. There it triggers a cascade that lowers the calcium available to the muscle fibers, and muscle without calcium cannot stay contracted. So it lets go. The vessel relaxes from the inside out on a chemical command, not a mechanical one. And because the gas is so short-lived, lasting only seconds before it breaks down, the signal has to be produced again and again, breath by breath and minute by minute. There is no reservoir of it in the bloodstream to fall back on. A vessel is only as open as its most recent supply of the molecule. This is why nitric oxide sits at the center of vascular health. Blood pressure is, in large part, a negotiation between how hard the heart pushes and how willing the vessels are to open. A vessel that opens easily lets the same volume of blood through at lower pressure, which is gentler on the heart and on the vessel itself. A vessel that has lost its supply of nitric oxide stays narrower than it should, and pressure climbs to force the blood through. The pump has not changed. The pipe has stopped relaxing. Now hold two facts side by side. The body makes nitric oxide in the walls of its vessels through enos to keep them open. And the body also makes nitric oxide somewhere else entirely, in the hollow chambers of the face, and releases it into the air you breathe. Two sources, same molecule, different addresses. The vascular source is built into the artery. The other source has to be carried in on the breath, and only one of the two breathing routes picks it up. So when the vessels of an older body grow stiff and the pressure creeps upward, the first instinct is to call it wear. Decades of use. Aging pipes. But a vessel that will not relax is not always a worn vessel. Often it is a vessel that has stopped receiving its chemical signal to open. The problem is not damage. The problem is absence. Hook to next block. If the nose is the second source of this molecule, then the nose has to be doing something the mouth does not. And the difference is structural. Picture the two routes air can take, drawn as plumbing. The mouth is the simple route. It is a wide, smooth corridor running from the lips to the back of the throat. Its purpose is throughput. It can move a large volume of air quickly, which is exactly what is wanted during hard effort, when the body is desperate for oxygen and cannot afford the resistance of a narrow channel. The mouth is a fast pipe, and that is all it is meant to be. The nose is not a pipe. Inside each side of the nose, the air does not run straight. It is forced through a series of curved, narrow passages folded over scrolls of bone, so that the stream is broken up and slowed and pressed against the moist tissue lining the walls. Around those passages, sitting in the bones of the face, are the paranasal sinuses, hollow chambers connected to the nasal airway by small openings. And the cells lining those sinuses are not passive either. They run an enzyme, a relative of the one in the blood vessels, and they produce nitric oxide continuously, releasing it into the air inside the chambers. Remotion call-out. Text: the sinuses produce nitric oxide around the clock. It is already waiting in the air before you inhale. Icon info. So the sinus is not a passage. It is a small factory that has been running all night and is holding a reservoir of gas. When you inhale through the nose, the incoming air sweeps through the nasal passages and draws that nitric oxide out of the sinuses and carries it downward, through the throat, into the windpipe, and on into the lungs. This is the effect that John Lundberg and colleagues described, sometimes called airborne nitric oxide, gas made in the head and delivered to the lungs on the breath. Breathe through the mouth, and the air never passes the sinuses. The reservoir stays in the chambers. The mouth route skips the chemistry entirely. What does the gas do once it reaches the lungs? The lung is not one uniform sponge. It is millions of tiny air sacs, each wrapped in tiny blood vessels, and at any moment, some regions are getting more air than blood, and others more blood than air. For oxygen to transfer efficiently, the blood needs to flow toward the parts of the lung that are best ventilated. Nitric oxide, the same vessel-relaxing gas, helps tune this. As it reaches the well-ventilated regions, it relaxes the small vessels there, drawing blood toward the air. This improvement in the match between air and blood is what lets a nasal breath move a little more oxygen into the bloodstream than the same volume of air taken through the mouth. There is a second thing the nose does to the air, and it belongs to the same logic. The narrow, moist passages warm the air to body temperature and add water to it before it reaches the lungs, and they trap a large part of the dust and particles that would otherwise travel deeper. The mouth does almost none of this. Air pulled in through the mouth arrives cooler, drier, and less filtered, and the drying alone has a cost because the delicate tissue of the airway works best when it is moist. So the nose is not only adding a molecule, it is conditioning the air on several variables at once, and the gas is simply the part that reaches all the way down to the vessels. The numbers here are modest, not miraculous, and worth stating plainly. The improvement in oxygen uptake attributed to nasal nitric oxide is in the order of a few percent, measured in controlled conditions. A few percent on a single breath is small, but breathing is not a single event. It is 20,000 events a day, every day for decades. A small per-breath difference, compounded across a lifetime of breaths and across every vessel that gets a steadier supply of the relaxing gas, is not nothing. It is the difference between a route that does chemistry and a route that does not. This reframes the comparison. The mouth is not broken. For a sprint, for a heavy lift, for any moment when raw airflow is the priority, the mouth is the right tool. But for the quiet default breathing that fills almost the whole of a day and a night, the mouth is a shortcut that bypasses the part of the system that makes and delivers the gas. The mouth moves air. The nose conditions it and seasons it with the molecule that opens the vessels. Hook to next block. A shortcut costs little when the supply is plentiful. The trouble is that the supply does not stay plentiful with age. There is a reason this matters more after 50 than before it. The supply of usable nitric oxide tends to fall on two fronts at once. One inside the vessel wall, one in how the breath is taken. In the blood vessels, the endothelium becomes a less reliable factory. The enzyme that builds nitric oxide, eNOS, becomes less efficient, and the gas it produces faces more competition from oxidative stress, which mops up nitric oxide before it can do its work. The net result is lower availability of the molecule in the vessel wall. Researchers call the consequence endothelial dysfunction, and it is one of the earliest measurable steps on the road to high blood pressure and to the stiffening and narrowing of arteries. It tends to be detectable well before any symptom, often beginning in midlife. Remotion fact card. Fact: endothelial. Nitric oxide availability falls progressively with age, an early step toward higher blood pressure and arterial stiffening. Accent color: #FFB100. It is worth pausing on what that decline feels like from the inside, because it usually feels like nothing for a long while. There is no pain in a vessel that has lost a little of its capacity to relax. What there is, instead, is a slow drift. A resting blood pressure that reads a few points higher each year, cold hands and feet that take longer to warm, a little more breathlessness on the same flight of stairs that used to be easy. None of these announce themselves as a nitric oxide problem. They are filed under getting older. And that is precisely the trap, because a quiet, symptomless decline is the kind that is easiest to leave unaddressed until it has become structural. So a vessel in an older body is working with a thinner margin. It has less of the gas it needs to relax, and it loses more of what it makes. And this is exactly when the second source, the nose, can quietly get switched off as well. Mouth breathing, especially during sleep, is common, and it does not always announce itself. Nasal congestion, changes in the tissues of the airway, and the simple habit of sleeping with the jaw open can all push the night's breathing toward the mouth. A whole night spent breathing through the mouth bypasses the sinuses and the gas they deliver, precisely when every source of that gas has become precious. Lay the two declines side by side, the internal supply in the vessel walls is fading on its own schedule. The external supply, carried in on the nasal breath, is being skipped more and more often. Both are losses of the same molecule, and the body reads both the same way, as vessels that have stopped receiving the signal to open. The stakes are not abstract. Vessels that will not relax mean a heart working against higher pressure year after year, and arteries stiffening in a way that is closely tied to high blood pressure and atherosclerosis, the conditions that weigh most heavily on health after 60. This is not a small cosmetic margin, it is the difference between a vascular system that ages gently and one that hardens early. Hook to next block. If part of the loss is a path being skipped rather than a part wearing out, then part of it can be restored by reopening the path, at no cost, starting today. The intervention is almost embarrassingly simple, which is why it is easy to dismiss. There is nothing to buy and nothing to add. The whole protocol is to stop bypassing a system the body already runs for free and to give it one small push. Start with the default. For ordinary breathing, the kind that fills the quiet hours of the day, keep the lips closed and breathe through the nose. In through the nose, out through the nose, slow and unhurried. This is not about taking bigger breaths. Bigger is not the goal, the path is the goal. Nasal breathing routes the air past the sinuses so it collects the nitric oxide they produce and carries it to the lungs, where it improves the match between air and blood. Mouth breathing skips all of that, so the first and largest part of the protocol is a redirection, not an effort. Send the air through the door that does the chemistry. Now the small push, and this is the part most people have never heard. The production of nitric oxide in the sinuses rises sharply when you hum. Weitersberg and Lundberg reported this in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine in 2002. Humming, compared with quiet exhalation, drove a large increase in nasal nitric oxide. The reason is physical. The sinuses are sealed chambers connected to the airway by narrow openings, and the vibration of humming agitates the air and dramatically increases the exchange of gas between the chambers and the nasal passage. The reservoir that normally trickles out is, for those seconds, flushed out. The chamber empties its stored gas into the breath. Remotion bar chart. Items. Label, quiet exhale, value. 1. Label, humming exhale, value, 15, accent color, #FFB100. So here is the dose, kept deliberately modest. Once or twice a day, sit upright, take a comfortable breath in through the nose, and on the way out, hum a low, steady tone with the lips closed for as long as that one exhale lasts. Then breathe normally for a breath or two and repeat. A few minutes is enough. There is no need to strain, no need for volume, no benefit in forcing it. The vibration does the work, not the loudness. A handful of these slow humming exhales once or twice a day repeatedly flushes the sinus reservoir into the airway. The pitch does not matter and the tune does not matter. A low, comfortable drone works as well as anything. What matters is that the lips stay closed, so the vibration stays in the nose, where the chambers are. There is a second time of day that matters more than any deliberate exercise: the night. A person breathing through the mouth across a full night of sleep is spending a large share of their life skipping the nasal source entirely and adding the dryness and the over-breathing that mouth breathing brings. Restoring nasal breathing through the night, when it is possible to do so comfortably, returns the largest single block of time to the system. For anyone whose nighttime mouth breathing comes from a treatable cause, congestion, allergy, structural blockage, that cause is worth addressing with a clinician, because the prize is a whole night of restored signal rather than a few deliberate minutes. Now the honesty that this channel owes its viewers. The acute physiology here is well established. Nasal breathing delivers sinus nitric oxide to the lungs, and humming raises nasal nitric oxide sharply. Those are measured, repeatable findings. What is far less certain is the long arc. Whether daily humming or a lifetime of nasal breathing measurably lowers blood pressure or changes cardiovascular outcomes over years has not been settled by large, long-term trials. Much of the supporting work involves short-term measurements, small groups, or acute effects, rather than decades of follow-up. So the right posture is calibrated, not evangelical. This is a free, low-risk redirection of a system the body already operates, grounded in solid mechanism, with the long-term clinical payoff still an open question rather than a promise. What can honestly be expected, and on what timeline? Within a single session of slow nasal breathing, most people feel the breath settle and slow, and the measured rise in nasal nitric oxide during humming is immediate, within those very seconds. Over days, as nasal breathing becomes the default rather than the exception, the dryness and the air hunger of habitual mouth breathing tend to ease. Over weeks, the nose itself often becomes easier to breathe through, because it is being used as designed. None of that is a cure for anything. It is the steady, unglamorous restoration of a signal the body was built to receive on every breath. Hook to next block, step back from the single molecule, and a larger principle comes into view about how a body decides to maintain itself. There is a habit of thinking about breathing as a question of quantity. How deep? How much? How many liters of air? By that measure, the mouth wins easily, because it moves more air with less resistance. And yet the mouth delivers less of the molecule that keeps the vessels open. The lesson is that the body does not only count the air, It reads where the air has been. This is the recurring shape of so much of the body's physics after 50. A system is described as wearing out, when in truth a signal has stopped arriving. The vessel that will not relax is read as an old vessel, hardened by years. Sometimes it is, but often it is a vessel whose chemical instruction to open has grown faint, partly because the internal factory has slowed, and partly because the breath stopped carrying the gas that the nose was built to deliver. One of those causes is genuine wear. The other is only a door left closed. The nose was never a backup for the mouth. It is a chemical conditioning chamber that warms the air, cleans the air, and seasons it with a gas the vessels need. And it has been running that chemistry on every quiet breath since before there was a word for any of it. Breathing through it is not a technique, it is the return to a design. So the closing instruction is not a regimen. It is a small change in how the air enters. Through the door that does the chemistry, with the occasional hum to flush the chambers, and through the nose at night when the body would otherwise spend a third of its life with the door shut. Nothing is added, a path is reopened. The body does not maintain its vessels by counting the air it moves. It maintains them in response to the molecule the breath carries. And the path the breath takes decides whether that molecule ever arrives.